Hey guys, this is Gym Therapy Inc. here, and we are talking about shadow work today. Today is July 9th. Yes. I'm Trista. I'm the owner of Greenfire CrossFit and also a member here at Gym Therapy.
Gym Therapy, I'm Justin, and I'm to Trista's left.
All right, well, we got the awkward out of the way.
Yeah, we started it out.
Let's start with what our week was like.
My week was pretty, I don't know. We had a 4th of July party this week instead of last week in my family's, and the only bad part was it was like 1 a.m. before I knew it, so I'm a little tired this morning, but no, I'm not hungover, so don't worry.
And you made it to the gym twice
this week, yeah. So
I mean, we wanted 3, but we'll take 2.
I know. I tried Friday night though.
You did on a Friday night, and I wasn't even there.
I did happen to see a picture of me in the swimming pool yesterday. And I might go to the gym a little more from now on.
Sometimes it's the little things that are the drivers,
from
right?
like nips up, I looked fine, but down
you just were happy. All right, fair enough.
That's a band name, Nips Up.
Nips Up. That's actually a pretty good one. So my week was pretty good. We had like our mock CrossFit Games week at the gym, so all the workouts, if you were there a little more, you probably would have noticed.
I know, because Clint, I picked up on that later Friday, so yeah.
So we did workouts that were like events, like event one day we had 2 workouts, and it was really fun. We got to see the camaraderie of everyone and seeing them doing hard things, things they didn't think they could do in the allotted amount of time. That was really cool, and hit some PRs. We had our whole 5 a.m. class. What day was it? Friday? Every single person, myself included, hit a PR on our Olympic lift on the snatch. Really, really cool. After running a 600-meter run.
That would... second, or did we do 3 Friday? Or 2?
We just did 1 workout, but it had 2 different...
2 different, yeah.
Yeah,
it felt
2 different
like
pieces.
I'm like 600 mile and a half. That was a lot to start.
Did you PR on your snatch?
No, I didn't, just because I wasn't sure. Because remember, my back was tight and whatnot earlier in the week, so I did about 80%. So
nice.
Yeah.
It was really cool. Just I stood up the 135, and I've been chasing that forever.
I saw that.
And I stood it up, and I was like screaming. And then Barb hit a PR, Erica hit a PR, Amanda, the entire class. It was really, really cool.
That's awesome. Your 5 a.m. class is just a bunch of good, quality, determined people.
Yes, and I think you have to be to get up at 5 a.m. But it also is just making something a habit.
Yeah.
You know, no one, like, there are times that the alarm goes off at 4 in the morning. I'm like, I don't want to. But it's just part of now who I am and what I do. So today we're going to talk about shadow work. I thought I wore a good shirt for that. I went to see a band this week. And there's Freddie on there.
Oh, yeah. Shadow work.
So we're going to talk about shadow work and what it is. Have you ever heard of shadow work?
Just from you over the last year or two, to me, shadow work is like boxing. Something like, something.
Fair enough. But that's not what we're going to talk about today. It's not about boxing. So shadow work, it is, all of us have traits that we're proud of and some that we don't feel great about. And some traits may trigger or embarrass us, so we repress them and we hide them from the public view. Coming to terms that a shadow self exists isn't always easy, and many people repress these parts of themselves to avoid having to confront your dark side.
Okay.
So the things that you kind of don't want people to know about you, the stuff that you hide in the deep. And when I think of shadow, I think of jealousy.
Yes.
I think of anger. Those things we typically don't like to show other people, but we all have it. It exists in all of us because it's part of the human experience.
And what's really funny about that is when you bring that stuff to the surface and say it out loud to another person, it's like, that's really not that bad.
Yeah, and they're usually like, oh, me too. Yeah, I get it. Repressing your inner shadow often leads to triggers or emotional reactions that end up bubbling to the surface. Typically don't end well. It's when you have explosive outbursts where you're screaming at someone. It takes training, it takes self-awareness, guidance, and courage to face your shadow in a healthy way.
Yeah.
Shadow work helps you integrate and accept every part of yourself so you can live with more clarity and authenticity. So what is it? Where does it come from? So psychologist Carl Jung popularized the idea of shadow self or inner self. He defined the collective unconscious with 8 different archetypes. So your self is the center of the personality, your psyche. It's what you're consciously aware of.
Okay.
Your shadow is your dark and emotional aspect of your psyche. When they say dark, they kind of go around that. It's not always defined as like inferior or immoral. It's not always the case.
Kind of like hidden.
Yes.
Instead of
saying like a dark, it's not like that you wish harm upon people. Yeah. But I always think of things like jealousy and envy. You know, those
coming
are things
from my enemies.
Yeah, they're normal feelings that people have, but we hide them. Anima is an image of an idealized woman that draws people into their feminine side.
Really? I never heard of either of these next two words.
Me neither. Animus, a part of you that has a capacity for reflection and self-knowledge.
Okay.
I think that's really cool. Persona.
Yeah. I think this is going to be good.
Yeah.
I like, you're onto something with this shadow work.
You know?
Yeah.
The mask you wear to show the world while you protect your inner self is your persona. And you ever meet someone and you know them professionally and you know them in the real world and you see like two
completely
different
people?
Yeah. And I think that that's a good example of it. Mm-hmm. Then there's your hero archetype, which is a part of your psyche that can overcome evil and destruction. The wise old man, a personification of the self that contains your wisdom.
I'm sorry. I'm right here.
You're really good at those, yeah. And the trickster, also good. Mm-hmm. A childish part of your psyche that needs gratification. And just going through those, you can look and you can pick out things of yourself that you see in those. And
so these are the archetypes of your inner self.
Yes. And this is, this whole idea was developed by the psychologist Carl Jung.
Okay, cool.
So what is the shadow? And looking into that, it can be something as easy and as small as when you were a child, someone telling you that you talk too much. And you start retreating inside, you start being less open, and you're a very small amount of words when you express yourself. So how can that come out? Every time that you go somewhere, you do something, you think, oh my God, did I overtalk? Did I overshare? Did I do something wrong? And then say one day, an example they have here on betterup.com, one day you're making a presentation for work and someone says, be careful not to put too many words on that slide. Doesn't mean that you're doing anything
and then
wrong.
Your whole presentation's bucked up.
And you're mad.
Yeah.
And you're immediately mad and angry at this person when it's nothing oversharing or anything.
That was the dog burping, I think, maybe.
Growling.
She growled.
So,
sorry.
Nothing super angry that you should be angry with, but it gets that part of you that you that someone told you was wrong.
Yeah. Like a trigger point at one point.
Yes.
Yeah.
So let's talk about how it affects you.
I think I might have told this story on here before, but one time I was like 7 or 8 years old and I was at my neighbor's and he was wiring a CD player into his new Jeep. And I was sitting beside him and I was like, I don't know, like I said, 7 or 8. And I was leaning out the door looking at something because he didn't have the doors on it, and I fell out and we were sitting still and my foot grabbed the wires, or hit the wires and tore his CD player out and it just like flung over. And he just said to me, he's like, what goes on in your head sometimes? And now every time I do something stupid, like every once in a while I do something stupid and then I'll be like, what the fuck does go on in your head sometimes? What goes on in my head?
And it's weird that it's just the small things that people say that can make you repress yourself. And I always worry about not being smart enough to do things. Like we talk about imposter syndrome, and that's one of the big things that come up in shadow work.
Yeah.
Is your like limiting beliefs that you're not good enough and you're not smart enough, and not enough is like a core wound that I've had to work really, really, really hard to heal. And all of those things show up, and I'm like, where did that come from? And that's from maybe like failing a test at one point in your life and being like, well, I'm so stupid. I'll never, maybe biology just isn't the thing that you excel in, but you carry that into life of like, I failed this test, so I'm not smart.
And we constantly remember the negatives instead of the positives, but that's 100%. also built into you so you survive. It's so you kind of recognize when you do bad stuff, like don't do this again. But sometimes, we're not meant to sit in a classroom at 7 years old learning whatever else. Like we're meant to be out in the world doing stuff and whatnot. We just the way things.
What's interesting, you say that too. We focus on the negative and not the positive. We're also told not to boast about ourselves and not to be arrogant.
Act like you've been there before.
And not to constantly.
Yeah.
And that's also being proud of who you are and being proud of your accomplishments shouldn't be something that should be seen as negative.
Yeah.
And it all depends on how you put it out into the world. If you're like, I'm the greatest it's ever been, constantly in someone's face, then yes, that's a negative aspect. But if you're saying, hey, like, I've worked really hard to get here and I've put in a lot of effort, and I deserve the things that are coming to me because I put in the work. That is a healthy way of being proud of who you are.
Sure. Like in baseball games, when a guy hits a home run down 9-1 and like throws his bat and whatever, come on. But then, you hit a home run to like win a game or something like that and then throw your bat. There's times for celebrations, and there's times where you just need to recognize, like, I did good, but don't, celebrate small victories, but celebrate big victories too.
And also just being kind, how you deliver something in your message matters.
Yeah.
So how does your inner shadow affect you? It can have a negative impact on your well-being when you ignore it or you reject it. The part of yourself that craves to be understood and explored, it's usually shamed. And so that's why a lot of times when you're shamed, you stuff things down, right? You never want to deal with it because it brings up feelings of guilt and shame, and nobody likes those feelings. And we're not mentally and emotionally at our best when our shadow isn't integrated into ourselves, which is to say when the shadow and the self are far apart.
Okay.
And you think about that whenever you start therapy and you start talking about the stuff that's really hard to talk about, when you leave there, typically it doesn't feel good. You feel like I would go through like shame spirals. I would go through guilt. And it was a hard thing to process and to work through. And sometimes I would just want to go home and just sleep because it was exhausting.
Oh, yeah.
Until I started realizing that, like, even though I went through this trauma or I'm having these feelings, doesn't mean that I have to associate negative feelings with shame.
That's interesting. Negative feelings with shame, not that they don't have to be the same things.
Yeah, they don't.
All right.
So the effects of ignoring your shadow: self-loathing, poor self-esteem, self-deceit, anxiety, depression, offensive behaviors towards others, struggling to have healthy relationships with others. Here's one that I think should just be like plastered on the screen. Self-sabotage.
Ooh. You
don't think that you're deserving of the good things that come into your life. Self-absorption and an inflated ego. So for some people be quiet and they kind of draw within. Other people are just like, whoa, like, look at me. I'm the best thing that's ever been. And that's all part of, they have to put on that persona because what's going on the inside isn't really aligning together.
It also depends on like what pole you're on that day. If you're on like, if you're high or low, it depends on how you react to a lot of this stuff too.
And when you reject your shadow, you may also start projecting things onto others. Projection happens when you see things in others that you subconsciously recognize within yourself. Those parts can make you feel uncomfortable. As a result, you seek to judge or punish others who reflect those traits. That's a really, really, really interesting thing. And for me, part of this shadow work that I'm doing is when I feel like judgment towards others, I stop and I ask myself, why? Why am I feeling this way about this person? What is it?
Yes.
And for women, jealousy of other women, be it looks, body, success, whatever. If you stop and you ask yourself, what makes me jealous of this person? You will learn so much more about you because it typically has nothing to do with them.
Yeah.
And it's everything about what you're feeling inside. Like, oh, well, this person has a really great body and they constantly wear like skimpy clothes. Well, why does that make me jealous? Because I wish maybe that I looked like that, that I had that body type. And I take that, when I see that, I immediately think judgmental thoughts when I can say, okay, what do I do to get the results that this person has? Instead of holding judgment towards them, reaching out to them, learning from them. Hey, you look amazing. What can I do to get those same results? Yeah,
and some of the jealousy probably comes from the fact of not what they look like. It's the fact that they have like the determination and the will and maybe the luck, the genes, stuff like that.
Sometimes,
But like they have put the effort into that stuff. But you don't know what's going on with that person on the other side too that makes them want to look good, but maybe they're hiding something, drawing attention to this, whatever.
Or just, everyone's motivation, determination, and drive to do things is different.
Yeah.
So reaching out and learning, but you're right. Like they could have other things that they are dealing with, and their way of coping is through exercise or external validation or whatever. So that's something I've learned about myself. And man, life is getting a lot more peaceful when you start identifying what triggers you and what annoys you and what bothers you. You can have a lot more of a peaceful life.
Mm-hmm.
And
you're doing a lot like in this last half year. Like when's the last time? Do you even drink at all anymore or anything?
Not really. I have about a drink to two when I do drink, and it's just something I know that the best emotional me is a person without alcohol or substances. And one beer, maybe two on a special occasion if we're doing something, or a mixed drink, I'm okay with. Anything beyond that, I'm emotional. And since I know that it's a trigger for me. Since we lost Leroy, that was, it's hard. It's still hard for me to process, and it's still hard for me to be okay, because what is the one thing we always did together? We drank.
Yeah.
And so when I start to drink, like my memories creep up, and I think about all of the things that we do, and it just kind of puts me in a spiral where I'm not okay. And, I know that he wouldn't want me to live in that spiral where I drink, I get sad, I spiral out of control, and then repeat the process. So that's something that I had to kind of recognize for myself.
You know what's funny you said about memories, like whenever you drink, it brings up this, you kind of spiral because you go into this or that. Mm-hmm. The last month, I've been I felt like I was like asleep the entire time. Like I just had this underlying like nagging feeling. And this is like my second year taking bipolar meds.
Okay.
So year one was very interesting because you reflect, and like I didn't drink for an entire year and didn't whatever. And I was learning a lot about myself. Well, year two is even more interesting because now you have like 1 year to work off of. And every season you start to remember like, oh yeah, last summer I felt like this. So I recognized it like a month or so ago, and I had a yearly psych appointment coming up. So I recognized it like a month or so ago. And because I was watching TV and I was like, nope, not watching that. That's sad. Nope, not watching that. That's funny. No, so I was putting on like science fiction shit just because I didn't know what I was going to get. So I didn't even want to like listen to music. It was just because like I don't want to be happy. I don't want to be sad. I just didn't want to. I just like blocked it all. But so when I went to my psychiatrist, she put me on a new bipolar med. It's a new, it's not a new one, but it's new for me. And I might be able to go off a different or whatever. We're just going to kind of transition into it. It's called Abilify. And about 7-8 days into it now. And I feel normal. Like 2 days ago, I just started to feel like normal. And it was such a good, because I was with my family last weekend. Did not want to be there. No offense to anybody. They could tell. Did not, but I didn't want to do anything. I just kind of wanted to sit in the basement. And that was it. And then yesterday it was just so much fun, and it sucks. It sucks being like that, Well,
it's good that you're able to identify it too. That you're stopping and you're saying, "This is what I felt like."
Yeah, because I would have never known. I'd have never done that before.
I mean, a lot of people were just like, "Oh, this is just a phase. I'm just going through it," and then they just completely shut off, and then it's six months later, and you're like, shit, I still feel like this.
Yeah.
Or a year later, or people are like, I felt numb for 12 years of my life.
I know.
That's not a normal.
Yeah,
thing.
It's like it'll be fine next week, and then 35 years later, it's still not fine.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think this is a really great topic to talk about because there are so many things that we repress and we're uncomfortable talking about and sharing that we're losing the ability to learn things about ourselves. And how many people do you meet that are like, this is just the way I am. This is it. Take it or
there's
leave
a lot
it.
of people that die because that's just Gary being Gary or whoever. Yeah.
Or they end up dying alone.
Yeah. That was an interesting thing in that suicide class I took, where not all suicides are a single one-time attempt or one-time success, whatever you want to say. Some suicides are years. It's years of abuse. I have no need to live, so why wouldn't I drink all day or smoke cigarettes or whatever else, not eat right? Like, I don't want to live long anyways. People are like that. It's wild.
And it's sad.
Yeah.
It's a sad thing. So what is shadow work?
That's what you're here to tell us.
That's what I'm going to tell you.
Yeah.
It's working with your unconscious mind to uncover the parts of yourself that you repress and hide, even from yourself. This can include trauma or parts of your personality that you subconsciously consider undesirable. Anyone can do shadow work on their own. However, consider seeking out a licensed therapist for treatment, especially if you struggle with severe trauma. So what is the goal of shadow work? It's not a flaw or mistake, your shadow. It's a natural part of who you are. Shadow work at heart about developing self-awareness and ultimately self-acceptance and compassion. It's often both therapy and more spiritual, helping you see the different parts of yourself.
Talk this way.
Okay. So for people who have been especially good at avoiding their shadow, for instance, because it is too far different from your own perception or desired impression, shadow work is about acknowledging the existence of shadows and about getting curious about exploring them. So thinking of that, your own self-perception, who do you think that you are? When you ask someone, how do you think people perceive you when they first meet you for the first time? What do you think that they think of you?
Ooh, good thought. I typically like meeting people the first time. The second time, pretty exciting. But like time 3 or 4, they get to know me. I'm like, stand back, pal. Yeah.
And your self-perception, how you think that people perceive you and how you perceive yourself, then your desired impression, the impression that you put on other people. So we tend to want to put our best self out there. We don't want people to see the parts of us that are jealous, angry. There are some people that don't care. The other people see that, but most people don't. They don't want to show off that part of them. So for those whose shadow is associated with trauma, and that can be any kind of trauma. That can be childhood trauma. That can be abuse. That can be a long list of things with the word trauma.
Yes, and trauma, the way we try to kind of explain it is, if you have open heart surgery when they cut your chest, that's severe trauma. That's trauma. Yep. If you stub your toe, that's still trauma to your toe. These two things are completely different. So when you have a situation like me, like falling out of the Jeep, that's like stubbing my toe, but when you have a bigger issue, like, abuse, something like that, that's like the open heart surgery. That's the trauma. So there are different levels to trauma, but in a sense, they're all the same thing.
And different layers.
And different layers. That's what, layers. Obviously the severity is different. That's kind of what I'm trying to get to.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, you wouldn't think stubbing your toe is trauma, is what I was getting at.
Yeah.
I was buying you time right there.
Yeah, you totally totally got me out of place, but that's fine. So what are the 8 benefits of shadow work? So you can gain more confidence and self-esteem. You can show up more confidently when you show up as a full version of yourself, shadow and all. There's no more hidden self-doubt and parts of yourself that you may dislike or loathe. And I talked about like jealousy. When I feel jealousy and envy,
coming from my enemies, every time you say it, it's
if you feel that, you can start to look into it and be like, what is bringing up these feelings?
It's keys coming from overseas.
I'm sorry. I don't know what to do with him today. He's out of control. So
Tupac. Looking
at those different parts of your personality, instead of looking at them as a shameful feeling, look at them as ways to learn of how to be a better person. Mm-hmm. And it's not shutting, like, where every time I feel jealous, I'm like, no, you can't feel that feeling. Because that's what we're told, right? Like, jealousy doesn't look good on you. You hear, like, people say things like that, these kind of comments. But if you look at it and say, I'm feeling jealous of this person, why?
Why are you?
Why? Or I'm feeling anger at this person. Why am I feeling that?
Yeah, and that a lot of people go to the Bible. Well, you're not supposed to covet your neighbor, but why are you not supposed to covet your neighbor? Not like why can't I? It's like, what's the reasoning behind it?
Yeah, improving your creativity is number 2. You can uncover a lot of really great things about yourself, like your creativity. You can tap into all your unique expressions. Build better relationship with others. When you tame your projections, you can see others for who they really are. You no longer see them as projections of the side of them that you dislike. That is really cool. That one was like a light bulb going off. When you tame your projection, so what you project onto others, you can see others for who they really are. You no longer see them as projections of the side of you that you don't like.
All right.
So when I think about that, I think about, for me personally, people that are super loud, or constantly yelling and laughing really loud. I'd be like, oh, a person is so much. They're so extra all the time. And then I stopped and I was like, why does that bother me?
Because you want to be happy and loud.
Why does that bother me?
You're loud as...
And I think about that. It bothers me because I was always told, be quiet. And most females were told to be, quiet and pretty and sit down.
And all kids are told to be seen, not heard.
And not be boisterous. And those are the things that, especially girls, girls were conditioned to, be quiet, sit, be pretty, polite. And when you see people going out of that norm, especially for me, be like, oh, that person is so much. I'm like, but they're just being who they are.
Yes.
And that's something that should be celebrated. So when I look at that and I'm like, you get that ping of annoyingness where you're like, oh, so annoying. And then you're like, they're just having fun.
Yeah.
They're just being who they want to be. Practice self-acceptance. So this gets you out of your self-loathing and gets you into practicing self-awareness.
Self-awareness, the good kind of self-awareness, is one of the best tools you can have in your belt too.
Yes, being able to understand jealousy, what it's coming from, being able to understand anger, where it's coming from. You can discover your hidden talents. I thought this one was a pretty cool one. So some people may fear that their shadow contains too much darkness, but in most cases, the golden shadow takes up most of the space. It's never had an opportunity to thrive before. And your inner strengths and resources sometimes come out of your shadow.
Would you say golden shadow?
Yeah. You can use your shadow work to uncover what some people call the gold in your shadow bags.
The gold in your... Okay.
But they did call it the golden shadow.
Okay.
So I thought that was pretty cool too. Improve your overall wellness. So when you are not repressing something, you don't have that constant anxiety of oh my God, someone's going to figure me out. Someone's going to figure me out that I am not as good as person as I'm portraying it to be. You increase your compassion towards others. So if you reduce your own projection, it makes it easier to interact with others. Mm-hmm. And it also helps you identify when other people are projecting onto you.
Yes.
When someone meets you with anger over something that's very small and minute, and you're like, that was way more happened? Than what needed to happen. And then you're like, okay, that doesn't really have much to do with me, and this person's going through something right now.
Yeah.
And having better clarity. It gives you better clarity on how your thoughts, emotions, and feelings lead to the way you act. That right there is a huge one on its own. And I think it's definitely worth taking the time to do some shadow work. Yes.
And I think in order for this to work properly, I always talk about environment. You have to be in a good environment for it. You have to have a pretty healthy idea or image of what your relationship is like with your spouse, with your kids, with your parents, with your coworkers, stuff like that. Because if you're around people that gaslight you and make you feel differently than what you are, it's very important to do this shadow work to be able to identify that and not be manipulated into thinking you're something that you're not in a bad way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And just hitting on, this is from healthline.com. They're talking about shadow work, and it's the idea that we all have different parts to ourselves. The parts of ourselves that have been exiled tend to become the shadow parts. As a child, there are many times you're told to stop doing something or repress parts of yourself for whatever reason have been deemed unacceptable. And it can provide important answers by doing the shadow work. You're trying through this work to make a deeper connection to yourself and your soul to be a more complete version of yourself. And I think that just touching on having a better connection with yourself, I think in the past year, even I would say 6 months for me, I have been in a better place of connecting with who I am and strengthening my core values and standing up even when it's really uncomfortable.
And do you see how you're getting rewarded for that too? Do you
Yes.
see the success that you're having,
Yes.
especially in this last 6 months?
And it's hard. It's uncomfortable. I don't like confrontation. If you know me, like I always say, like, I will run to China before I get in a fight with you. It's just not my thing. But now when something doesn't align with me, or it makes me uncomfortable, or it is degrading or uncomfortable for other people that I love, I stand up in the situation and say, like, I don't agree with that.
Yeah.
Or like, it makes me uncomfortable that you're talking about someone like that I care for, or you know that this is an important person to me, and if you have a issue, you should probably reach out to them.
And that's something we should do more of too, instead of staying like meek in those situations. And you can handle them gracefully.
Yes.
But don't let people assume you think like them whenever it's something bad, something negative, whether it's racist, sexist, whatever. You don't have to like step in. You know what I'm saying? Don't.
Yes. Well, and it's too, like, when someone makes a racist or homophobic statement back, years ago, I would just uncomfortably stand there and wouldn't say anything because the confrontation scared me. And now I'm just like, that is not okay. Like, I'm not comfortable hearing that conversation. Please don't say those things around me. And then I don't shame them and say, like, why, like, because a lot of people that act like that, they're not going to learn anything by what you're teaching them. You're trying to tell them. So when you say, I'm not tolerating this conversation, I'm leaving, you hold the power in that situation. Walk away from it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not comfortable. It's not, but you feel so much better. And when you learn to kind of heal that fight or flight, because a lot of these things activate your fight or flight. When you start to heal that fight or flight system, where you're like, well, I'm not going to run away from this. I'm just going to face it and say, like, I don't like that.
Yeah. And these little, I don't want to say they're small issues, but these little things that you used to be afraid to say, but now you're saying, that's the stub toe trauma.
Mm-hmm.
But that stuff, you can see how it snowballs into bigger stuff, and just being able to handle those little things. Like, fight or flight should be for a lion trying to attack us in the woods, not because we're scared because someone said something.
Yeah, I mean,
in a convenience store.
I just had a situation happen not too long ago, where someone was saying not kind things about me, and I knew it. And typically, I would just brush it under, and I confronted them. I was like, I know unkind things are being said, and it's okay that you feel that way. I'm not mad at you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not mad about it, but I can't be invested in this relationship any longer if that's how you truly feel. Like, there's no sense of going forward. And there was no anger there, and I didn't want to run. I just confronted, like, I just brought it up, not angry at you, and I wish you well, and that's it.
Look, you grown up.
And that's what you can do for people. And you can have, I have a situation also where someone constantly is doing things that are disrespectful to me, and things that I don't believe that I deserve, and things that I wouldn't do to other people. And my answer to that was, to cut that person out. If someone is doing something to me consistently and disrespecting me and doing things that I wouldn't do to them, then they don't deserve to have, number one, a space in my life. And they also don't deserve the space up here, where I'm not going to consistently think about them, because that's taking away from the peace that I've worked really hard to gain. And the best thing is just to, cut it at the axe. And it doesn't mean that you have to wish bad things upon them. It doesn't mean that you have to hate them. It just means you have to cut the cord and let it go.
Yes. And not all relationships have to end badly. Some just have to end.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you can still honor the shadow part of your brain that says, fuck that person every once in a while. But you also have to realize that you can give them a couple seconds of your thought if you need to release it, but not let them live there rent free.
And circling back to these relationships, time might make sense. It wouldn't different times in your life, but you got to be able to at least take breaks from the people that irk you. Mm-hmm. Just for your own health. And
just also looking at it from being a business owner, and people come and go, and looking at it as it's seasons. Sometimes you only have seasons in people's lives. You're not meant to be there forever. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that season ends, and you wish people well. And it's not a betrayal. It's not a deceit. It's none of those things. It's just it was good having you while you're here. Goodbye. Yeah, and release.
If you're in a workplace too, you spend 8-12 hours a day with people for years.
Yes.
And you build relationships, and you go to their house, and you have this and all that. And then a year or so after not working with them, it's like, how you doing? That's it. And the relationships just, they come and
They
go.
change.
It's too hard. It's too hard to keep up with everybody too.
It's exhausting when you think of it that way. And, and I'm so grateful that I have the friendships I have that lasted since high school. I can catch up with people. I think I've talked about Allison and Jen consistently. I don't get to see them all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And Jen's now coming into the gym and training with me. So that's really awesome.
Yeah.
And I get to train her and her boys, which is something I just like, what did I do to deserve this? It's like amazing.
That's what I'm saying. All this stuff's coming through. You're training Chase's kids, and how many kids do you have now? 12 or so?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's awesome. And that's something you didn't have 6 months ago.
No. And it's something that gratefulness is something I practice every day.
Yeah.
Gratitude is something that you have to practice. And for how long I was grateful for all of the people I had. And then it started calling in more people by being grateful. So
bring your kids if you want.
We'll start in the fall. We're going to do fall classes for the kids as well. We're halfway through the season now for the kids classes. We're going to do an after school program for the kids.
Awesome.
And it's going to be really fun. I really enjoy it. And my friend Riley just posted pictures of her daughter or video of her daughter and her nephew climbing ropes. We just learned that on Wednesday.
Oh, nice.
And she's like, she's never been able to get this high before.
Yeah.
And sometimes not the parent coaching a kid and letting someone else do it, they'll respond differently.
They do.
They just do. And I just thought it was so cool seeing it getting put into action.
That is cool. Yeah.
So let's talk about how to do shadow work. So we're talking about shadow work. We're talking about what it is, how to do it. It takes time and it takes awareness of your emotions. And it's some things that other people might shrug off, like being aware of your emotions. You're going to have to be intentional about noticing your own reactions. Someone's been doing it for a long time. They're going to be skilled at it. I'm getting a lot better at it. But at the beginning, I just had to start journaling and writing things down and seeing like, okay, I've had this reaction to this maybe person or this thing or this situation multiple times. Let's dig into that. My therapist is absolutely incredible about pulling out situations. My partner and I will get into a fight and I would say, like he would say, I didn't do this, 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 and this. And then I list all of the things that I've done. And she's like, okay, do you think maybe that's hitting your I'm not enough wound? And I'm like, yeah, maybe. And she's like, so you're both trying to be heard and you're getting defensive when really like this person is telling you what they need from you.
People are literally give you a roadmap on how to treat them.
And you're listing back all of the things that you do to do it when you're not hearing each other. And I thought that was a really cool thing where I'm looking at, okay, I'm being triggered because I feel like I'm never going to be enough for someone. I'm never going to be good enough. And I thought that like being able to list these things is really cool. Yeah,
therapy. A lot of people are just so anti-therapy. They just go sit and talk about your feelings and blah blah blah. They don't want to do that. You have no idea what your therapist's plan is either. And like I said, I have been figuring out myself a little bit better this last 2 years. But I've also been seeing the same therapist every couple of weeks for the last 2 years. Mm-hmm. And there's stuff now that I can tell she knows about me without me actually saying I do this stuff and whatnot, because I can see her making notes sometimes and I stop paying attention to that because I just stopped paying attention to that. But they have a plan for you and they bring this stuff out subtly and slowly over time, whether they're talking about themselves or they're talking about something else, or they bring up a scenario to get you to say certain things, to answer questions they're not asking you directly. Yeah. So therapy's a lot different than what you guys think it is. It's not just like you're not laying on a couch, talking about whatever. You're just sitting there having a conversation with another person. And absolutely. They're leading, they're directing, and let them do it too. Unless you have something important you need to say right now.
Let them see the things of you that you might oppress from That's why I think it's so cool to go to a therapist. Because like you might not want to tell your friend your deepest, darkest things because there's that trust barrier, right? That we all have. And if someone goes and tells your deepest secret to someone else and then that person then shares that to the next person, that's horrific and it's mortifying. And how many people have experienced that in high school in groups of girls? Me. Victimized, completely victimized. So like my trust wound is deep. So I decided, I would bury a lot of things inside of myself. I wouldn't want to talk about it with anyone because that's happened. And it's really hard.
Yeah.
It's hard when people break that trust to get it back and then to be vulnerable and open with other people again. So
people also blame their current spouse for stuff their old spouse did. Like you got your your feelings were hurt 25 years ago, so now your current spouse is dealing with that bullshit.
And that's unfair.
Yes.
I think that if you go through a big breakup or a divorce or something like that, that you should take some time to do some trauma work or go to therapy, do the things, because you can't, it's almost impossible to not take your childhood wounds and your relationship wounds from the past into your next relationship. And I can 110% attest to that sitting right here, that I was the product of both of those. So another thing about your shadow work, a general guide to it, is think about times when you feel something bubbling up inside you and you're wondering why you're so upset. You're upset because there's a part of you you've been hiding for a long time and it wants to come out. And a lot of times we'll hear about something or see it, automatically judge it and shut it off. If you judge yourself, you distance yourself from yourself, then the analysis stops and we move on with life. I encourage people to notice strong reactions and sit with that. And that's from a psychologist. Her last name is Sweeten. And thinking about how many times we've judged ourselves and we've never learned anything from it other than self-loathing. And I think about that a lot. Of you fail a test in school and you're like, you're just such an idiot. Like, oh, I can't believe you did that. You're such an idiot. But we don't go into the fact of, I didn't study until literally the night before at 11 p.m. for an hour.
But like for me, it wouldn't be, you're not an idiot, or like you're not an idiot for failing a test. You're an idiot because you didn't do the steps to pass the test.
I would just be like, I'm stupid. I'm not smart.
I'd be like,
I literally would.
See, that's mine. It was like, yeah. You're lazy. Because I like half the time I am lazy. Like I don't mean to be, but I'm tired. And it's like, idiot, couldn't. And then I start to think like, was I being lazy or was I depressed or whatever? Yes. It's hard to, yeah.
One thing I started doing, so I was procrastinating. I have a lot of goals, a lot of things that I want to get done with the business. And procrastination is a hard one. When it starts to get overwhelming, you know what I want to do? Just pick up my phone and start scrolling. So I was like, okay, procrastination is on the list. So I'm going to get my work done first. And then if I have time to scroll, I'll scroll. And, you know, I'm running a couple of businesses. So
you don't have time to scroll.
I don't have time. And some days I'm like, this sucks. I don't have time to do something I want to do. Sometimes you just want to mindlessly scroll and not have to think about something. But I make goals for myself every day of like, this is what I need to get done today here. It's done. Then I have time to do this. And since we had Chase on a couple weeks ago.
Mission 22. Check that one out. PTSD.
Great episode. Journaling. He's like, I journal every day. I started making myself journal every single day. And right now I'm still doing the Untamed journal. It's awesome. One of the, I think we might have talked about the Mission 22, but this one just stands in my brain. One of the lessons in there was to write down a song, and it says the song name, and I feel this when I hear this song, and it reminds me of this. And it's like a list of 10 songs that hit like deep, deep things. And I'll listen to that when I'm... So
they're pre-picked, they actually say the song. And
you pick it.
Oh, you pick your own song.
And what it brings out in you, what it makes you feel.
That sounds like my nightmare.
It's a cool thing though, because I saw it like showing me like the happy things in my life, the hard things in my life.
I like any of those.
and then like the times that like where your power comes out. And that, listening to that playlist, I'll go from like jamming out to crying. And sometimes I'll listen to it in the car, and other times, like yesterday, I listened to it while I meditated. I just laid on the floor and I just listened to it, and I allowed myself to like process all the emotions around those songs. And it's not always easy.
Well, that sounds like a nightmare for me.
Yeah. Well, it's not for everyone.
No, I'm not saying it. It sounds like it probably is good.
It is good.
This guy might be onto something.
But
this woman could be onto something.
She's onto something.
We don't know it.
So let's talk about shadow work test. Here's a short list of 5 questions to ask yourself before starting your shadow work. Number 1, who am I? Number 2, what do I want? Number 3, What do I have to let go of to get the things I desire? Number 4, who do I have to become to receive those things? Number 5, how do I want to show up? 5, shadow work exercises, some exercises you can do to build on your shadow work in or out of therapy. Evaluate times when you overdo it. So exploring areas of your life where you overdo it. So working late hours, and how you, like when you overdo it, working late hours, how you engage with others and yourself. Ask yourself, what do I do to overdo it?
Yes.
List your responses.
Try to remember too, overdoing it is good stress is still stress.
Correct.
So whenever you're doing a lot of fun stuff or whatever too, that still takes some out of you too. So overdoing it isn't just I'm working too hard.
And your cortisol levels don't understand what's good stress and bad stress.
Yeah.
Stress is stress. Limit your responses. Think about why. What are you trying to accomplish? And what void are you trying to fill?
Oh, how about that? Or escape from.
And list those responses.
Mm-hmm.
Deplete versus elevate. Grab a blank piece of paper and make 2 columns. Column A depletes me. Column B elevates me. Think of interactions that hold you back. List them in column A. And then interactions that fulfill you. List them in column B. Acknowledging shadow parts. So before we move on to that, think about a list that what depletes you. Like what throughout your day depletes you and what elevates you. Anything you can think of?
Not, you'd have to give me a minute. I froze.
It froze.
So what in my day elevates me and what depletes me?
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you what elevates me is I really like being in the, like I do sales, so I'm in my car by myself a lot. And I realized like last year when I was in Florida and we were doing hurricane cleanup, and I was working with 12, 13 other people at the same time. And I got the opportunity on some of the jobs to be like a leader or at something a little more than what I do here. I really like the camaraderie of being around people.
Mm-hmm.
I really like, that's a good way to start my day. Like, and I know sometimes you have like bullshit meetings you have to go through and it's blah, 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 and the monotony and all that.
Yeah.
But man, you take that all away and you realize how much of it you miss it. So that would be my answer, I guess, to what?
To elevate you.
To elevate and depletes. So when you're not around these people, that happens. Like you have to be around.
So your routine job is kind of depleting because you're just kind of going in that same circle of routine.
Correct.
Yeah.
But when I get to do other stuff, that kind of elevates
you.
it enough to do that other stuff, I guess. Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah. How about that?
Next one is say it out loud. Acknowledging shadow parts to a loved one or therapist can aid in self-acceptance and get rid of shame. So identify your potential shadow parts. So for me, that would we talked about jealousy. Jealousy was one that I had to really identify and look into. Anger, things I had to look into and discuss that and how it may have originated. Flip the script. All traits and parts, even shadow parts, have an upside. When you can identify your shadow parts, explore what the benefits of the shadow part might be. Identify potential shadow parts such as imposter syndrome.
Ooh, that keeps coming up a lot.
Yes, and I feel like that is a huge one. And I know so many women, pretty much all women, feel imposter syndrome and that fear of being incompetent and that you know other people are going to figure out that you don't know what you're doing. And the upside to this may be that you're detail-oriented, self-aware, and conscientious. So that you are so focused on not being seen as an imposter that you overextend yourself. Yes. And you really, really put forth 100% effort. So even though our fear is the imposter syndrome, our shadow, sometimes good things come out of it where we're extremely detail-oriented and we are showing up and doing extra work to make sure that, we're seen as we know what we're doing. Finding value. Shadow parts can be distressing, but they can also reveal our values. List your shadow parts. Consider what these parts tell you about your values and think about ways to live by your values. So if we look at, we're using jealousy as an example, that tells me why I hide that in my shadow is because kindness is the number one thing that I like to provide for people in my life. I like to show up as a kind person. And jealousy is not a kind emotion, right? Like it's
Sure.
not something that's good. So I look at that and it's telling me I hide that in my shadow because I don't want to be a person that's jealous. I want to live the life of kindness like I definitely try to do. So I think that is a really interesting, and think about ways to live by your values. So when I look at that, I can say, okay, instead of feeling jealous, I can learn from this jealousy and not project my feelings of jealousy onto this person of why I'm jealous, but instead find lesson in that. And that's kind of it. That's what we got as far as ways to do it by yourself. If you're
Okay.
going to go to therapy, I think that this is something you can have a plan with your therapist on how to discuss your shadow and how to kind of integrate your subconscious and your conscious mind together to
Okay.
become like the most authentic person. And there's also journals. If you're uncomfortable doing this with other people, and a lot of people are, because this does bring out the dark side in you that you haven't acknowledged for probably 30 years of your life. There's journals out there you can write into. They have journal prompts. There is actually, I saw it on TikTok. I don't use it myself, but there is a shadow work journal book. I'm sure there are tons of them on Amazon. Just look around and you can find stuff.
Yeah.
I follow a pathway called To Be Magnetic, and they have different guided meditations. And one of the specific deep imaginings is just about shadow work, and it was probably one of my favorite ones. And it was like, I think the membership is like $22 a month. And I follow that and I meditate to it. Typically, I try to do it once a week. I'm not great at doing meditation a lot just for time, but the shadow work has been the most beneficial for me as far as finding those parts of myself that I needed to work on.
And there's so much free information out there. I don't need to hear the excuses of I don't want to because I don't have this. I mean, you have time to make bad choices. You have time to have bad habits, blah, blah, blah. You have time for good ones too. And like you said, we pick up our phones, we scroll. Just go on Instagram and find like Power of Psychology or some of those pages that you can find them that relate, and then just read and then reflect and think about that sort of stuff. I always say you seek a professional, not for medication, but to speak to get opinions and whatnot. And if you need medication, I do. So whatever. But you have to put in the work. You have to do it because, as they say, if nothing changes, then nothing changes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I mean, like I said too, just some of these things are about your deepest, darkest secrets or feelings or whatever. You sometimes don't want to just share them with everyone, and especially not with with friends. And if you don't know that trust is there, like some of these things are painful things to get out, especially if it comes from any type of trauma, childhood trauma that you had that you haven't told other people about. Make good choices as far as who you want to share your vulnerable side with, because not everybody deserves your vulnerability. Not everyone is entitled to that. And I think that's something Brene Brown makes very clear. Like, not everyone is going to use your vulnerability for good and to help you. Some people are going to take advantage of that. So make sure that you're smart when who you're divulging your deepest, darkest secrets with. And that's why I said if it's not a therapist, then, if you want to go the route of a journal, I think that's great too. But some of these things are private and they should be held that way. And sometimes our friends aren't the best at not being yes men in our lives, which is great because friends are great for that reason. But sometimes they don't help us as far as they want to see the best parts of us. You know what I mean? They're like, oh, you're just feeling this because of this. It's not a big deal. But sometimes you need to honor that shadow side in order to integrate. And basically, I think professionals or doing the work yourself with journals is the best way to do it.
All right. And if your friends are a-holes, tell them to off.
Your friends probably aren't all that.
What else? Anything going on? We're going to start having classes sooner than later too. I have about 5 or 6 people that have been reaching out to me recently that want to do something. I don't know if you guys want to give us some feedback, like what days of the week work, what times. I think for us, it's always going to be Sunday.
And a topic. I mean,
we can pick whatever you want.
As far as my 8 jobs go, probably Sundays are going to be the only days at work, and we need to have a good topic. So if you guys have any topics that you want to learn about, want to hear about, let us know, and we can put a class out there, advertise for it. We want to have at least 2 weeks to advertise that it's happening to get as many bodies as we can in the room.
I'm probably going to cut the uhs and ums and blah, blah, blah out of the video, but I don't think I'm going to throw pictures and stuff up anymore. It takes too much to find them, save them, add them, and blah, blah, blah. It just takes too much. I think with the podcast, it's going to be more like podcast style, and I'll do a little bit like intros and stuff like that, but I'm not, it just takes too long. Like to listen to this, I got to listen to another hour plus do all the editing, and it's like a 4, 5, 6 hour process, and I just don't have time for that. I'm trying to recruit someone too.
And I just want to say that if you are a person that is on this path and you are doing all of this work and you're coming into like, this is kind of spiritual work. This is finding, things out about your higher self and going deep into your core. It is not always a fun, happy ride, and it gets messy, and sometimes you hit rock bottom. Sometimes you hit deep lows. It's normal. They're not doing anything 100%. Wrong. There's nothing wrong with you. I was at my rock bottom probably about a year ago, and it took a lot of therapy in both partner therapy and individual therapy and podcasts and listening and learning, and it was messy. There are still some days where I'm just like, how the hell did I survive that? And I didn't know. Like the past probably 5 years, I'm like, how the hell did I survive these past 5 years? And I just didn't want to give up. There were times that I wanted to. There are times that I definitely wanted to just give up on myself and just, not be here anymore. But then I also had to be reminded that that's not a quitter, and I never have been. And I had to just keep pushing through it. And it was really messy, and it was really scary at times. So if you're doing this work, I know it's not easy, and just keep pushing through. And if you need help or you're having any thoughts that are scary, intrusive, please reach out. Like, that's what we're here for. We're not professionals, but if it's something we can do to push you into the arms of professionals and get you help to prevent anything happening, please reach out.
Yeah. And if you need a reason to get better, just look in the mirror. You yourself, that's enough reason.
Absolutely.
All right, guys, that's it.
All right. Love you. Bye.
Love you guys.
Whew, that was a deep one.
Woo! I know. Hey, what's going on?
She's like, I'm ready.
Oh, yeah.
Get the hell out of here.